What's up, everybody? The Boxing Source checking in, and this is really a follow-up with a conversation that was on the podcast recently, as we bring up the topic of pound for pound, as what has happened recently has brought up this discussion once again. Now we have three strong candidates for the top spot in the pound for pound rankings, and we're going to go through each of these fighters here to see who will end up being number one on the Boxing Source pound for pound rankings. Now, a lot of things have gone on over the past few weeks in the sport of boxing that have involved a few fighters that have been included in the Boxing Source pound for pound rankings for some time. But we also have, one other fighter that has something coming up here in the summer that could, get that person particularly back in the conversation if, we don't end up being number one. But we're going to go through pretty much the resumes or the cases for three fighters that could be, ended up being at number one in the Boxing Source pound for pound rankings. Now, first up, who I'm going to bring up is Naoya Inoue. You got Naoya Inoue at 27-0, 24 of those wins by way of knockout, 4-division world champion at light flyweight, super flyweight, bantamweight, and super bantamweight. Yes, he is 2-division undisputed champion at bantamweight and at super bantamweight. He recently had his fight against Luis Neri over in the Tokyo Dome in Japan, where he was able to get a stoppage victory. Yes, he did respond from a first round knockdown that he suffered against Luis Neri, but he was able to respond to that, come back, and end up stopping Luis Neri. Now, he has had a few notable wins over the course of his professional career. You had the bouts that were in super bantamweight where he was able to win the undisputed titles with his wins over Stephen Fulton and Marlon Tapales, right? And also before that, when he defeated Paul Butler to become undisputed at bantamweight and had those wins in the bantamweight division, particularly in the World Boxing Super Series. He had the wins over Nonito Donaire on that, Manuel Rodriguez as well. So he had a pretty good resume going from the bantamweight division and also the super bantamweight division, where it looks like he is continuing his career right now. So that kind of like has him, be up there in the discussion as far as like his resume is concerned. Did talk about his record there, having 24 wins by way of stoppage, and has defeated a lot of the top fighters within his weight classes that he has been in. So that gives Naoya Inoue a strong case for being number one pound for pound. Next up, you have Terence Crawford, 40-0, 31 of those wins by way of knockout. Also, a 2-division undisputed champion. Undisputed at 140 pounds, super lightweight. Undisputed at 147 pounds, welterweight. He had a world title at 135 pounds as well. He was able to stop all of the opponents that he has faced while being at welterweight. Whether it was Jeff Horn or Jose Benavidez Jr. or would have been like Sean Porter, Amir Khan. Of course, his last one against Errol Spence Jr. to become the undisputed welterweight champion. It happened last July. And he has kind of like been in the conversation for among the top 3 pound for pound for a good amount of years now. And his performance against Errol Spence Jr. was one of the best performances of the year from last year. And he's had those wins, like I said, against Errol Spence Jr., over Sean Porter, over Amir Khan, there at welterweight. We had the win over Julius Ndongo to become the undisputed champion at super lightweight. And had against Yuriorkis Gamboa at 135 pounds. And a lot of people say that he has a good mixture of offense and defense to kind of like say he's one of the most skilled fighters in the sport of boxing. So given what he was able to do at 135, 140, and 147, that kind of like puts him up there in the conversation for number one pound for pound. Now the third candidate is pretty much the recent candidate here, as he just had his fight. That is Oleksandr Usyk, who he was coming in there with a record of 22-0, 14 of those wins by way of knockout. Yes, also now a 2-division undisputed champion. And his run, at cruiserweight was a great run at cruiserweight, and it was like pretty much like a brief run, so to speak. But it was also, part of the World Boxing Super Series tournament where he was eventually able to become the undisputed champion at cruiserweight. And, from going from cruiserweight to heavyweight, he's had a couple of fights out there, notable fights, against Maris Brightus, Tony Bellew, among others. So he had a pretty good resume right there within that cruiserweight division and whatnot before fully moving up to heavyweight. And when he moved up to heavyweight, we had, fights against, Derek Chisora, and then his notable fights where he was able to fight Anthony Joshua twice, get decision wins over Anthony Joshua twice. Then, after that, had a fight against Daniel Dubois, and we know the whole little thing what happened with Daniel Dubois, but he was still able to come back from that and get a stoppage victory over Daniel Dubois. And then a couple of days ago, was able to withstand some adversity against then undefeated Tyson Fury to be able to score a knockdown on Tyson Fury in the 9th round. And then that pretty much was the difference for him to get a split decision victory over Tyson Fury to become the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. And, that was something that, maybe some people may not have thought would have happened when he initially entered the heavyweight division, but he was able to do it out of, all the people that were in the heavyweight division that were mentioned among the past few years, the Tyson Fury's, Anthony Joshua's, Deontay Wilder's, who else had a world title, like Joseph Parker, those guys were not able to get all the belts and become undisputed at heavyweight. Oleksandr Usyk is the first person in 25 years to become the undisputed heavyweight champion, and the first in a 4-belt era in the heavyweight division to become undisputed champion. So there's one for Oleksandr Usyk. Now I named those 3 fighters: Naoya Inoue, Terence Crawford, Oleksandr Usyk. At one point, I've had Usyk at number 1. I've had Terence Crawford at number 1 in the Boxing Source pound for pound rankings. Naoya Inoue hadn't really gotten to that particular point. Could have, pretty much had a case there as he was able to, dispatch Luis Neri on May 6th over at the Tokyo Dome there. And, we had a very good performance. Like I said, was able to respond to what happened there in the first round of that bout against Luis Neri, right? You also do have Terence Crawford, like I said, has been number 1. And the thing with Terence Crawford, he has those great wins, had that run at welterweight where he was able to stop everyone that he faced at welterweight. But one thing that I kind of like have as a criteria there for pound is like resume and how things go, recently, and with Terence Crawford having just like one fight a year basically since 2019 or something like that. Like he's only had one fight each year. So he has, what's coming up here against Madrimov, and then, like I said, last year there against Errol Spence. Then he had the one year before over in Omaha, where he faced David Evanesian. And then the year before that was against Sean Porter. And then he had just, one fight, even before that, and that was back in 2020. So, not being frequent as far as like fight goes is one thing that kind of like is a setback. But at the same token, you also have Oleksandr Usyk, who's had, just one fight a year, up to this particular point so far, the Tyson Fury. Then, you had the thing there with Daniel Dubois last year. And then the previous year was the second fight with Anthony Joshua. And then the year before that was the first fight with Anthony Joshua. So he's had like one fight per year, over the past 3 or 4 years up to this point. We'll see what happens here later on if we have a rematch between Oleksandr Usyk and Tyson Fury. Now, on the flip side, you got Naoya Inoue, who, has had kind of like 2 fights per year that have happened over the past couple of years, while he has been on his track to become undisputed champion in the bantamweight division and also in the super bantamweight division. And, now he had this fight, recent fight against Luis Neri, and he's looking to have another fight here before the end of the year. So that kind of like is one thing that is a, something that I kind of like hold high when it comes to trying to compare who would be there at number 1. But given what we have there so far, right? My vote right now, guess it's gonna be recency bias. Oleksandr Usyk. Now, here was the main part of me having Oleksandr Usyk as the number one pound for pound fighter right now. Not just because he become the two division undisputed champion with his win over Tyson Fury. He was able to defeat two of the top three fighters within his division in the cruiserweight and heavyweight divisions. You know, when he was able to defeat Marius Briedis and Murat Gasayev in the cruiserweight division to become undisputed champion, those were pretty much the top two guys there in that division in cruiserweight. He defeated Anthony Joshua, defeated him twice, and to become unified champion. When he had the first win, Anthony Joshua was there, number two, pretty much number two or number three, depending on what some people were thinking. I'd say he was number two, below Tyson Fury at that point. And then he was able to get the win in the rematch, and then after that, face and defeat either would be the number one or number two fighter in Tyson Fury to become the undisputed heavyweight champion. So to have pretty much like 4 wins against fighters that were, within the top 2 or the top 3 of your division, I mean, come on, you're going to have to, put them in there as the number one fighter pound for pound. Now, real quick, the whole thing is that, some folks say like, oh, you know what, man, a heavyweight shouldn't necessarily be pound for pound because they're in the heavyweight division. Well, here's the thing though, man, like, especially those that are like just kind of like getting into the whole thing with the discussion. Check this out. Kind of like raised this the other day when you had a very talented fighter in the past, one of the greatest fighters, some would say ever, most talented, most gifted fighter in our generation, Roy Jones Jr. Yeah, he was able to come up from the middleweight division to become the heavyweight champion of the world. And when he was heavyweight champion, I'm like, come on, you can't deny that he was, without a doubt, the number one pound for pound fighter in the sport. I mean, that pretty much like he kind of like proved like what it is to be a pound for pound fighter. You can go from middleweight and then all the way up to heavyweight, you middleweight or, super middleweight, have a brief run at super middleweight, light heavyweight, you're able to do your thing there, light heavyweight, become undisputed there, light heavyweight, and then go up to heavyweight, face and defeat John Ruiz to become heavyweight champion of the world, or what was it, WBA champion of the world there, and, just have all those skills. So, he was kind of like the best pound for pound fighter while being at the heavyweight division. Other thing is too, like you've had other instances in the past where heavyweight fighters have been ranked in the pound for pound rankings in, other publications or whatever it is, because some people kind of co-sign to certain publications as to their rankings, whether it's pound for pound or divisional rankings. But there's been a recent discovery, shout out to King P, it showed where you had Evander Holyfield and Riddick Bowe listed in the pound for pound rankings through, what was it, the Ring magazine? So yeah, you can have heavyweights in the pound for pound rankings. And here I've had Oleksandr Usyk in the pound for pound rankings, for a good while now. And now he takes over the spot, or pretty much takes back the spot of number one pound for pound in the Boxing Source rankings. Now that's pretty much what I say in reference to the pound for pound. You can check out the full list there on theboxingsource.net. You can also share your thoughts as to who you feel should be number one pound for pound, or who you say is number one pound for pound, but also, kind of give or state your case as to why that particular fighter should be number one pound for pound. Don't be like, oh my God, Terence Crawford should be number one. I mean, he's the undisputed welterweight champion. He beat up Errol Spence, so he should be number one. No. I need a little more than that. You know what I'm saying? I need a little more than that. Or, look at Naoya Inoue. I mean, he beat the number one guy in light flyweight. He beat the number one guy at super flyweight. He beat Stephen Fulton to a pulp. He blew him out. So he should be number one. I might need a little bit more than that. I mean, I kind of like, explain the case there for Naoya Inoue. Anyway, but like I said, what Oleksandr Usyk has done here at this particular point, man, I don't know if we're ever going to see that, man. So that's why it's Usyk. But if you enjoy the content, you know what to do. Hit the like button. If this is pretty much like your first time here, go ahead, hit the subscribe button. It don't hurt. We appreciate the support. With that, I'm out.